Welcome to the Finance Marketing Podcast, a show that empowers finance professionals to market their businesses in ways that feel good and actually achieve results. I'm your host, Hillary. I've been working with folks in financial services to develop marketing strategies that work and create results-oriented marketing content since 2020. And I've learned a lot about what works in finance marketing, what doesn't work, and where financial services pros get stuck. Join us each Friday as we explore real, effective ways to market your finance business and connect with folks who truly embody your ideal clients. My guest this week is Morgan Nichols, CEO of LifeBranch Wealth Partners, an Ameriprise private wealth advisory practice. Now, Morgan is a seasoned financial advisor who believes that wealth is more than just numbers. It's about creating an intentional legacy that reflects your values and secures your family's future. She brings a comprehensive and strategic approach to financial planning, specializing in advanced tax strategies, executive compensation, and guiding high-income earners through pivotal transitions. Her practice is especially attuned to the needs of the sandwich generation, those managing both aging parents and growing children and empowering them with clarity and confidence. Morgan is also the co-author of Intentional Legacy, a book that reflects the philosophy she brings to her work, which is "You will leave a legacy, why not make it intentional?" Through her leadership and client-first mindset, she not only guides individuals in planning their futures, but also invites like-minded advisors to join a firm rooted in culture, integrity, and client service. Now, I was really excited to have Morgan on because I'm always excited to talk with women wealth managers and advisors, as women are such an underrepresented group in this space, and Morgan leads a team of predominantly female advisors. So in this conversation, she takes us behind the scenes of what it was like to write her book, Intentional Legacy, which she co-authored with Kelly Bass, one of the advisors on her team. We talk about the decision-making process behind committing to such a big project, how the book became a clarifying tool, not just for marketing, but also for internal team alignment and client relationships, and the unexpected personal growth that comes from the introspective process of putting your expertise and philosophy onto paper. Morgan also shares how authorship has created credibility and opened doors to speaking opportunities and podcast interviews that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And so I really appreciated how honest she was about the time investment that is truly required to write a book and how the value extends far beyond just having a finished product. So for advisors who have write a book on their 10 to 15 year goal list, this conversation will give you some really practical insights and things to think about into what the process actually looks like and why it might be worth moving that up on your priority list. So without further ado, let's dive in. Morgan, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Finance Marketing Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Hillary. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
I am too. It has been so fun getting to know you over the past, couple days as we've prepared for this conversation. I would love if you could start telling us just a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
So I'm Morgan Nichols. I live in Dallas, Fort Worth, but I run a wealth management practice. We kind of cover coast to coast, clients all across about 40 states of the US. And I get the joy of leading a team of advisors that's really focused on helping clients with all areas of their financial lives and help them navigate life, right? Life, but do it with intentionality.
I love that. And I have to say, Morgan, I always love talking with women wealth managers and women advisors because women advisors are kind of underrepresented in this space. And I think that you said that your team is mostly women advisors as well.
Yeah, I laugh because I started the industry and I started on an investment desk in Boston, and it was probably less than 10% female, and I was definitely the youngest. So I felt very out of the loop at the time. But my team, we actually have 4 female financial advisors and a 5th one that's working on getting her licensing right now. So out of a team of about 9 advisors, I'd say we're beating the averages by a long shot.
That is amazing. Well, I'm excited to dive into your book today. I know that your book came out just this year. When was it published exactly?
Oh, goodness. I think it came out right around the April or May timeframe that we ended up launching it and starting to share our story with our clients and our family and our friends and the greater network.
That is Amazing. Well, I'm glad we're having this conversation now. At the time of recording, it's in November. So you've had a few months since the book came out, and you can really see some of the benefits of writing a book. And I'm excited to have this conversation because I know lots of advisors who want to write a book. That's one of, the 10 to 15-year goals for a lot of advisors. So I'm excited to dive into the process. Can you take us back to when you were first thinking about writing a book and what that decision process was kind of like? Why did you commit to a big project like this?
Yeah. So, I actually like to go back even before I started writing the book. It was probably about 2 to 3 years ago at this point, and I was getting on a plane. I was actually listening to a podcast. I wasn't a big podcast listener at that point, but I was hearing the story about this concept of writing a book and getting your messaging out there. And I was like, wow, that's like really cool. And that's really intimidating. That sounded, like the terrifying. Like, what do I have to say that could go into a book? But I thought the concept behind it was really great. And then so fast forward about a year after I listened to that, I ended up being at a conference talking with some people, and this idea of, okay, we actually have a way to bring this to life. And the thought process was at that point was, okay, what do I have to say? What's going to make a book that someone would actually read? Always being concerned on, how are people going to respond to it? I'm like, I'm a math and numbers girl. So English class, I'm glad I got through it. Glad that I learned how to write, but it's not an area I would say I thrived or really wanted to spend all my extra time. I'm like, give me math equations. I'll do those all day. So it was interesting, never thought about being an author. That wasn't on the horizon. But when we had this opportunity, it was sitting there and it was like, okay, there's a financial investment to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to be able to say, okay, this is going to be part of my overall, let's call it marketing strategy, is the financial dollars to create the book, to get it out there. But then sitting there, and I think the other investment was the time of just being thoughtful. And it helps that we had a guide to really help us create the structure and guidance around that. That made a big difference. But the question became, when we chose to do it, was like, well, why not? It may work, it may not work, but what do we have to lose? And what we had to lose was, a little bit of money, definitely some of our time, but so glad that I did it because the impact has made all the difference.
I have so many questions, and I think we can just be open here about who your guide was. I've had your guide on the podcast before. I'm happy to share his name if you are.
Yeah, so I worked with Paul McManus with the
Mm-hmm.
short book formula. You know, we ended up, I think, taking a little bit longer to do it. It was like, oh, you write a book in 6 weeks. It's a great tagline. I would say we probably spent more like 8 or 9 months, but we had two authors and we ended up doing a little bit of a bigger book. And we were just so thoughtful in the process. So he and his company were just such a great guide at helping us really get to the heart of. I co-authored the book with Kelly Bays, one of the other female advisors. She's an awesome female advisor up in our Chicago office. And it gave us that chance just to bring our thoughts together and really try to pull the best of my thoughts as an advisor and her thoughts. And she's so gifted with stories, pull those together and really share the message on how we care about our clients. And quite frankly, it's called Intentional Legacy because it's becoming our rally cry and our marketing theme for next year, this thought of get intentional. And how do we really just dig in deeper with our clients and really lean into the coaching side that I think so many people don't realize is part of that relationship with an advisor that really kind of delves into all the areas of their lives.
Yeah. Well, before we get into that, going back to kind of the beginning, I think a lot of people say to themselves, oh, I have to have an idea. I have to know what I want to say before I write the book. But you wanted to write the book and you knew you had something to say, but maybe you didn't know exactly what it was yet. So what was the process like behind, okay, I know I want to write a book and I also need to get really clear on what I want to say in my book?
In the process, I think it's really about being authentic to who you are, right? As financial advisors, we have the benefit of working with dozens, if not hundreds of clients. And we see similar themes sometimes in how we work with them and the impact that we make. And so when I was sitting there, it was like, we're going to write a book. It wasn't about pulling an idea out of thin air and trying to create something around it. It was pulling from real life examples, experiences, and helping to draw the picture, I think, in how somebody who comes in the door and knows nothing or has been saving money and but hasn't really had someone partner alongside them asking deeper questions could start to go through that experience and end up feeling with significantly higher levels of confidence, even a year after working together, and really unpacking these are the areas we dive into. Here's how we think about things, and here's some of the key considerations about being intentional.
Mm. I imagine that it's kind of hard sometimes to think about, well, I do this day in and day out. And so it doesn't feel particularly groundbreaking to you, but to people who don't do what you do day in and day out, it is really helpful and valuable.
That's been a big thing for me. So I'm actually the firstborn of two financial advisors. So math,
Mm.
numbers, I laugh because those little cash boxes that people have, when you're working as a vendor or whatever. I used to have one of those in my room, and it had all my envelopes with like, here's my summer camp money, and here's my clothes to go shopping, and here's, what I'm going to give to church because I was taught about tithing, and so it was like hardwired into me. And it wasn't until I was in college and really having to reassess what direction I wanted my path to take to sit there and say, wow, I really like this. I love personal finance, and it seems to be emotional for other people. And
Mm.
it seems like not everybody has the same level of clarity. And I sat there and went, well, maybe I should do this for a living.
Mm. Absolutely. So you mentioned that you've already seen some benefits or some impacts from having published the book. Can you share what some of those are?
Yeah, I think the book for me in many ways it's been a way to trust build.
Mm.
So, how do I talk about that? First of all, with my current client base who's read the book, they've sat there and they've gone, wow, Morgan, I should have read this 20 or 30 years ago. Like there's things
Mm.
in here that you're doing with me. And it really, I think, brought back the picture because we work meeting by meeting with our clients, but it brought together the whole picture, bringing in the value, and even ended up for some clients. I had a client reach out to me and say, I've read your book and I realized, why am I still working? I need to retire. Like this is not in alignment with my values anymore. And, I thought I had to work, but I'm realizing, it's time for me to make that change. And I've actually had multiple stories. I had a client just yesterday who brought my book back up to me. He wants to retire next year, right? We're balancing several different things on like spending and do we work an extra year or not, and how much do we spend in our first years of retirement versus do we spend later on. He's like, wait, let me get your book. And he's like, wait, so you talk about these go-go years in retirement, and then you talk about these slow-go years, and then you talk about the no-go years. And he's like, I want to spend more in my go-go years and less in my no-go years. And I'm like, okay. So it's fun to see the tangible impact of clients leaning into the story. I think as well with individuals who haven't met us yet or they're newer working with us, just having the book to say, oh, wow, this advisor, they've actually put their thoughts together. They have
Mm.
it in a version that I can, even if they don't read the whole book, they get an idea of who we are, what we're about.
Mm.
I'd also sit there and say, I'll say I'm a 35-year-old advisor. I'm female. I'm leaning into values based. I'm growing my team. So the other group that I share my book with is with advisors that are looking at, I want to sell my practice one day, or I want to
Mm.
retire, and I want to be intentional, there's the word,
Mhm.
but in who's going to take over those relationships. And if this helps tell our story and help anyone get to know me quicker,
Mm.
that's been helpful. It's also been great for like relationships with CPAs or attorneys. There's so many advisors that may be calling up and saying, hey, I want to work with you, or I'd like to work with your clients. And it just makes it a really low bar that they can share a copy of the book, or they can see
Mm.
that you've put your thoughts together. And so I would say, the idea is the book becomes a tool in your overall messaging. In some ways, it's like your business card at some point. I have a stack of business cards. I don't even know how many people hand business cards out anymore. But this is my introduction to say, here's who we are, here's what we're about. And if you'd like to get to know us better, start here.
Wow, I love that. As you were telling me the story about the client who called you and said, I think it's time for me to retire, I actually got chills as you were telling me that. I bet that was just such a huge compliment to
Well, and I,
you and the work you put in.
you know, what we've really come to realize is everybody has one life to live.
Mm.
And so how do we make it our messaging is, how do we make it as meaningful as possible? How do we understand our clients, not just understand, their finances, and we can tell them, okay, this is how much you can spend per year. But if it's not aligned with the top priorities based on where they're at in this stage of their life, there's so much of a coaching component. And I don't think a lot of
Mm.
people understand that. So it's been a great way for us to get that message across.
Oh, that's so great. So, is this something that when someone books a discovery call with you and you kind of start the prospect process with them, is this something that you send them, or how do you get the book into new people's hands?
Absolutely. So if someone reach out to us, it's an opportunity that if the meeting is scheduled out more than, let's say over that next week, we can of course go ahead and send them a copy so that they have that. I love writing a little note inside when I can, and so that they
Mm.
have a signed copy as well. But I also have copies of it in the conference room where I meet with people who choose to come in person. So that's an opportunity to always provide a copy. We want to make it accessible. For us, it's not about writing a book to try to make money off the book. It's about writing the book to get the message out there and help differentiate us from, the other 10 advisors you may Google that are right down the street.
Right, absolutely. Do you find have people come to you that have already read the book?
Yes. So people have reached out, and I realize I have clients that ask me for copies of the book. They're like, I have someone who should work with you. I say, well, let's just give them a copy, because
Mm.
that becomes, an easy way to create that introduction that's not as intimidating.
Yeah,
And it's
absolutely.
it's been great too, because we've leaned into this values, leaning into clients, leaning into their values. This is how we think. This is how I think. It's how Kelly thinks. But it's also become like the rally cry of like, this is what our team thinks. And seeing all of our advisors really starting to lean into the values-based advising, getting their behavioral financial advisor designations. It's become
Mm.
really an all encompassing, like, this is who LifeBranch is. This is what we do. This is what we're about. um,
Mm.
and welcoming them to our firm, or welcoming them into our, what we would consider our family.
Absolutely. And I think that's, probably a really underrepresented benefit of a book is just the team building opportunities and the culture building opportunities internally for
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah. I'm sure the team is tired of hearing me use the word intentional. I feel at this point it's almost time to get it like tattooed on my arm or something. I don't have tattoos, but I was like, I'm saying it so much. But it's not even been, and I think that maybe one of the unexpected consequences of doing something like writing a book is, so much I thought it was about getting the messaging out, but it's a very introspective process as well.
Mm.
With a book that has a name like Intentional Legacy, making a positive, our team is financial confidence for life and a positive impact for generations to come. Those are two cornerstones. And so the process of writing the book, digging in, telling the stories, also has me reflect on my own life and how am I living and how am I intentional. And that's almost
Mm.
been, just from an internal perspective, I've grown a lot as a person through leaning into that.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds like the book kind of became this really focus point that, internally for you, internally for the firm, for clients, for beyond clients, it just really became a focus point and forced you to get clear on a lot of things.
Clarity would be a really good word tied to all of that.
Mm.
And definitely
Mm.
some fun in the mix too. I mean, when you have a co-author, right? I had Kelly in Chicago. I'm here in Texas. We were supposed to be at a conference in Florida together. The hurricane hit. So I said, reroute your flight, come to Fort Worth. She learned Fort Worth and Dallas, not the same whatsoever. We were at the stockyards and she's like, it's more cowboy here in Fort Worth. I was like, yes, yes, it is. But we hunkered down in a room and we're editing it together. And, it's, you choose. I think you can choose to make it fun in the process as well. It's
Mm.
how do you make it, authentically you.
What was the driving reason or choice to co-author the book rather than to, author it solo?
Yeah, I really thought about that. And when we chose to do this, we were at a pivotal point in our practice where Kelly had, you know, Kelly was in a position, she's been an advisor for even longer than I have, but she was in a process of making a change. And we realized that instead of her going on and creating her own practice, it was an opportunity. We both felt like we could do more together and have
Mm.
more of an impact together, bringing our teams together. And so it became an opportunity not only to co author a book, but to really lean in and sharpen one another as we
Mm.
learned about, okay, Kelly, how do you do things? Or how do you talk about this topic with your clients? And, oh, I've got this story and you've got that story. And so it just helped us grow together as a team because I don't like to be a team in name only. We really want to make sure even if we have our own sets of clients, we're running from the same playbook and we understand each other and can build our teams up with the same focus. And so the
Mm.
book became a way for us to really bond our relationship as well.
Absolutely. Before I went into marketing, I have a teaching background and I got a master's degree. And it was through that program that I co authored a lot of research papers with some of my colleagues. And I just found the co authoring experience to be so educational. There are things that showed up in the papers that I wrote that would absolutely not have showed up if I had not co-authored. So I think it's just a really great way to, like you said, I love the phrase you used, to sharpen each other.
Yeah, I think, the reality is when you're co-authoring, you're checking a little bit of your ego at the door
Hmm.
because you're doing something together. It's not all about you, but it's because you believe the combined impact can be better than any one person on their own.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Well, is there anything that you would say to an advisor who is thinking about writing a book, maybe hasn't gotten very far past the, I think I might want to write a book thought process? If you could give yourself advice going
If
back.
I could give myself advice looking back, that not to think of the book as just having the book written in of itself, but to think about it as the process and the personal growth through it, and how it's not just about being an author, but it's really a tool. It's also really funny when you end up in your local network. And I was driving to work one day and saw somebody I know in the community, walk into a local coffee shop, and I rolled down my window and they're like, "Hey, you're an author now. Like, that's a big deal." And I had that happen a handful of times. And it was like, oh, okay, there's some sort of recognition with having authorship that, you know, people think it's a big deal. And, I mean, it is a big deal. It was
It is.
a lot of time, energy, effort into it. But look at it for growth. And I would say, as you're considering it, focus more on the time investment that you have to give to it more than the dollars. Like that's where
Mm,
you really have to be prepared if you really want to make it um, the best it can be.
absolutely. And actually, I actually thought of one more thing I want to ask you, Morgan, before we wrap up. I think you had mentioned before we hit record that the book maybe has led to more speaking opportunities. Am I right in remembering that?
It's been interesting. I mean, I'm having this conversation with you right now, Hillary. I don't think I had ever done a podcast before I wrote the book, and I've spoken on several podcasts at this point. And it just becomes honing your messaging and continuing to share it and get it out there. So you can use it in many different ways.
Mm, I love that. Well, Morgan, if people want to learn more about you or get in touch with you, where are the best ways for them to do that?
So I'm on LinkedIn. So Morgan E. Nichols you can always find me there. But our website is LifeBranchWealth.com. And you can also ask for a copy of the book. We have a link specifically for that, which is intentionallegacybook.com.
Perfect. Well, I'll link to all of that in the show notes as well. Thank you so much, Morgan, for giving us kind of a little peek behind the curtain about the process of writing a book and where it's led.
It's been so fun, and I'm glad to share it with you, Hillary.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Finance Marketing Podcast. If you're eager to market your business in a way that feels good and actually gets results, sign up for the Finance Marketing Podcast newsletter in the show notes so you never miss another episode. If you liked what you heard today, please be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite listening app and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. We'll see you back here next Friday.